This episode of Make It with Calvin has been partly brought to you by I Polish My Pasta, 3D printer filament by Protoplant, protopasta.com. Okay, so in a different video, I showed you guys this side, which is the super shiny side of the Proto Pasta Sheriff's Badge. The link to Thingiverse is in the description. But I intentionally left this side nice and ugly looking. This is just straight off the printer, dull, nothing impressive, to show you guys how I go about polishing using the Proto Pasta paper polishing set. So this is going to be relatively a real-time video. I'm obviously going to speed up the boring parts, but first things first, the only deviation I make is I grabbed myself a piece of some 180 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to use this to quickly knock off any high or low spots. This print looks pretty flat, but if there's anything that needs a little bit of tweaking, we can do that. And then the next step up would be to jump straight to the 400 grit sandpaper, but we'll get there when we get there. So first up, it's the 180. This is just my way of doing it. Okay, so this is actually looking good enough to continue on, so we don't need that anymore. Next up will be the yellow 180 grit, which is this stuff right here. This paper is also, you can tell it's been used a little bit before. This stuff is interesting because it's really thin. It feels like it's almost made on like a dryer sheet or something. I don't know. This stuff's designed, I think, for polishing jewelry is what I was told. It's really nice. Whatever stuff you guys use, I absolutely love it. A+. So already you can start to see some shine coming out. There's a little area that's a little low, so I'm just going to sand it by hand now. Also, I'm not 100% sure if this is wet dry grade. I would probably double check that it's wet dry grade, but I think if you were to wet sand this, it might help the paper last a little longer, but I'm filming on matte board, so matte board and water don't go together, sadly. I'm going to call that good. Also, if you wanted to save this fancy paper in the lower grit range, you could just use the stuff from the hardware store. I think it would probably work about the same. Okay, so now that we got it getting a little shiny, might be a little hard to tell on camera, we can now bump up from the yellow grit to the gray grit. This is 600 grit. And we can repeat the boring process. Definitely getting there. If you notice that, say, the print's not polishing up great in one spot, you can totally just, work it by hand like this. As a machinist, I'm used to polishing things on a flat surface, so that's my preferred method, but hey, whatever method works best for you. In the end, it's just a 3D printed sheriff's badge. And I'm going to say that's probably good enough. Now we can jump up to the blue, which is the 1.2K. And wow, this guy is really starting to shine up. You'll notice that there's areas where it's smoother than others. Totally up to you. For me, I kind of actually like the look where the areas that you can see where it was 3D printed, and then there's areas that are super smooth. Totally personal choice, but if you wanted to make this very smooth, I would find either be very careful, use a sheet of plate glass or work on a smooth piece of like granite with a piece of sandpaper and just wet sand it with some lower grits, very smooth, and you could probably have an extremely good looking print. Also, what you could do is maybe up the material flow a little bit for the top layers. So it might be a little bit taller, but you can ensure that there are not going to be any little gaps in there or anything like that. So it looks more like this. On this side, I spent an enormous amount of time just wearing down the layers so that way it was relatively flat. A lot more work than I'm going to be willing to put into this video, but just a little helpful tidbit as we go along. I'm going to say that's probably good enough there. So now we can jump up to the pink, which is the 4000 grit right here. Oh man, this is impressive. It never honestly ceases to amaze me watching the process of a print going from a dull, let's face it, ugly looking item to something that really starts to just show its true colors, if you will. Okay, next up will be the 6000, which is the teal sandpaper. Also, one other thing you'll notice is as you step up in the grit grades, it'll be taking off less and less and less material. So obviously, like I've said in other videos, focus on smoothing everything out with the low grits and go from there. Wow. Then last up is the, what I like to call finishing paper at 8000 grit. This stuff is, I know there's grit in it, but you really can't feel it. At this point, light pressure is all you need because you're just trying to polish up those grains. You're not trying to take material off. And there you have it. That is how I went about very quickly, mind you, polishing up this Proto Pasta little model. Obviously, like I said, I didn't spend much time to actually smooth it out, but I like this look. If you wanted to, you could come along and use some polishing compound like the Fab Luster, or you could use my favorite material, NuFinish, and just rub it on there. I mentioned that in other videos that are linked in the description, but I thought you guys would enjoy seeing how you can relatively quickly polish your prints. This, according to my little preview monitor, only took about 10 minutes to do. And when you think about it, yes, it's a little bit labor intensive, but let's face it, it doesn't take all that long to sand a part into finish, especially when you compare it to tumbling, which can take days, literally, to get things to happen. So maybe you could use this as a precursor to tumbling, or if it's something simple and flat that you just want to knock out, say, while you're watching the game or commercial breaks, or I don't know. Something like that, you can very quickly polish up your print and take it from cool to amazing. So I hope you guys enjoyed that, and see you guys next time.